Coming up in the Authorpreneur podcast, the concept of scene turning comes from screenwriting. That's how I learnt about it, by reading Story by Robert McKee. Each moment, beat by beat, contributes to the turning of scenes. Or in simpler terms, each beat within a scene creates a shift. I believe this is why Sean Coyne uses the term value shift. A scene will start off in one way, then ends in another. This turn or shift needs to be either internal or external, but this doesn't have to be an either-or scenario. You can have both. So what do I mean by an internal or external shift? An internal shift occurs from the point of view character's perspective. Something changes within them. It's related to that internal struggle your character experiences throughout the story. Welcome to the Authorpreneur podcast. I'm your host, mystery author Amelia D. Hay. On this podcast, I will bring you writing, book marketing, and self-publishing advice so that you can create your dream author business, build your author platform, and be creatively independent. You can find the episode show notes and lots more information on the podcast page at authorpreneurpodcast.com/podcast. Hello writers. If you're new to writing, you've probably read the title of this episode and thought, oh great, my scenes need to turn now. Or perhaps you're not new to writing, heard this term before, and you're thinking, oh no. Before you hit the pause button or scroll away, please hear me out. Value shifts are a great way to ensure that each scene moves the story forward and pulls its own weight. I also realise that I'm not the first person to discuss turning a scene or value shifts in the writing space, but I want to assure you that I don't want to add more confusion to the mix or discuss this topic in a way that's overly complicated. That's why I've called this the beginner's guide. In this beginner's guide, I will define the term value shifts or the concept of the turning of a scene, explain how a scene turns, share non-spoilery examples from the mystery and romance genres. I will also show you how you can check if your scenes in your current work in progress, outline, or finished draft turn and move the story forward. On top of this, I will walk you through how to fix a scene that doesn't turn. You'll probably have noticed that this episode is a part of a mini-series on writing great scenes. This series will be open-ended because I want to leave room for a topic that I might have overlooked. Also, I want to make room in this series for as many episodes as it needs. Why? Because I want this series to help you write better scenes. And in the spirit of that helpfulness, I've also included another writing exercise in this show as well. So far in this series, I've recorded episodes on what is a scene. That was episode TAP041. The anatomy of a scene, which was episode TAP045. Scene cliffhangers, TAP046. Story beats, which was episode TAP047. Turning points of a scene, which are also called value shifts, and that is obviously this episode. If there's a topic that relates to writing scenes that you'd love for me to discuss on the show, submit your topic and suggestions by using the form at authorpreneurpodcast.com/request, or submit a question for me to answer on the show or privately by filling out the form at authorpreneurpodcast.com/question. Just to let you know, this episode was recorded on Thursday, the 14th of August, 2025. I've written this episode a few times because it got a bit unnecessarily complicated, so thank you for bearing with me. In a similar vein, I've also recorded this episode twice because the first recording had a persistent hum, and on the odd occasion it had like a high-pitched, I don't know how to describe the sound, but it was like this high-pitched noise. So there was like a hum. It wasn't my Dyson fan. I have no idea what it was. I think it may have been one of my hard drives, but I don't record my external hard drives. I record to my computer, so I have no idea what it was, and I'm unable to recreate it either, which was equally annoying. It was difficult to edit out. I didn't notice this during the editing. I noticed it. Yeah, it was uploaded into Buzzsprout, and I listened to it because I attached it there's like a code that I can copy and paste and attach the player to a blog post. And I was listening to that and I realized, I don't understand why I didn't notice it was so bad when I was editing. Like I was embarrassed and I had no time to re-record. So I had to leave a gap in the recording because I had no episode left, because I also recorded this episode on the same day as a couple of others. Like I did a recording day and I regret that. I kind of feel like this episode is a bit cursed. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Anyway, enough of my podcasting dramas. If you're interested in reading the transcript or would like links to anything that I've mentioned in the show, check out the very long blog post or edited transcript at authorpreneurpodcast.com/TAP050. And if you're new to this podcast, I want to say a huge thank you for stopping by and trying out my show. To those of you who've been faithfully listening, thank you for regularly listening in and supporting me. Your support means more to me than you know. Before I dive into the content, here are a few important definitions that you need to know. I realize that not everyone will want to go back and listen to the previous episodes, so for the sake of clarity, let me share a few definitions so we're all on the same page. What is a chapter? A chapter is a tool to help control the pacing of the story by grouping together one or more scenes. Chapters can be as long or as short as they need, provided that the chapter has a page-turning effect on the reader. That's what matters most, the reader experience. If a chapter is a tool, then what is a scene? A scene is a unit of story that takes place in a specific location and time. If one of these changes, you have a new scene. If you want to know more about scenes, check out episodes TAP041, TAP045, and TAP046. Links to these episodes can be found in the show notes of your favorite podcasting app. In the event that I run out of room in the show notes, all of these links will be found on the blog post for this episode at authorpreneurpodcast.com/TAP050. The last definition I need to share with you is, what is a beat? A beat is a unit of story that comprises of a moment that moves the story forward and compels the reader to consider what might happen next. Each scene in your novel may be comprised of several different beats. In short, it is an exchange in action or reaction. And I know with other story frameworks, they use beat differently. This kind of beat is the type of beat that an actor works with when they're preparing for a role. They'll read the scene and they'll work on the backstory of the character and zero in on these beats within the scenes, and that's where they do their work. I guess that's really the only way I can explain it. And this is what I mean by adding confusion, because I don't necessarily think that the words beat or plot point should be used interchangeably, because I do feel they are a different thing. I'm just going to double check that. I guess if I explain it a little differently, if you think of a story like a road and there's signposts along the road, the plot points of the signposts, a beat is the step that you take between the signposts. Hopefully I'm not adding more confusion, but that's what it is. If you want to know more about beats, check out episode TAP047. Links to this episode. If you want to know more about beats, check out episode TAP047. Links to this episode can be found in the show notes of your favorite podcasting app. In the event that I run out of room in the show notes, it does happen because I do have a character limit. All of these links will be found in the blog post at authorpreneurpodcast.com/TAP050. Now that we're all on the same page, we all are familiar with the definitions, let's get into discussing how a scene turns. So, how does a scene turn? And what does a scene turning mean? The concept of scene turning comes from screenwriting. That's how I learnt about it, by reading Story by Robert McKee. Each moment, beat by beat, contributes to the turning of scenes. Or in simpler terms, each beat within a scene creates a shift. I believe this is why Sean Coyne uses the term value shift. A scene will start off in one way, then ends in another. This turn or shift needs to be either internal or external, but this doesn't have to be an either-or scenario. You can have both. So what do I mean by an internal or external shift? An internal shift occurs from the point of view character's perspective. Something changes within them. It's related to that internal struggle your character experiences throughout the story. For instance, in a mystery novel, the amateur amateur sleuth might start fearing for their own safety after discovering that their home or hotel was broken into and finding a threatening message stabbed to a piece of furniture. In a romance, a character might start a scene feeling happy and excited to speak to their love interest, but overhear something they said but not get the full context and feel dejected. Whereas an external shift is related to the plot and is focused on the story events within the scene. In a mystery, the amateur sleuth might start to figure out what led to the victim's death and uncover another important clue at the end of the scene. So what does this external shift look like in the romance genre? A workaholic heroine might finally let down her hair and go to a social event, but at the end of the scene, she might decide to go on a date with a guy that the reader knows is a bit of a douche. Even though there are personal elements to that, it's actually the external story. Because obviously a romance is about someone finding love and keeping it at the end. Because that's important. If you don't do that, you're breaking the genre tropes. But I won't go down that rabbit hole. Now that we've discussed the two broad categories of turns that you tend to see in scenes, what are the ways that a scene can turn? Essentially, a scene can turn or shift in 4 ways. From positive to negative, a scene starts off positive but takes a turn for the worse. Negative to positive, a scene starts off in a bad place but takes a turn for the better. From positive to double positive, a scene starts off positive and ends with another victory for the character. So essentially the character is going from victory to victory at this point. And lastly, from negative to double negative, a scene goes from bad to worse. You get it. Something needs to happen in each scene that alters the point of view character's course in some way. But this change needs to be significant enough so that your protagonist can't ignore it and keep going on their merry way. And interesting for the reader. Consider this scenario. At the start of your scene, your character needs to go buy groceries but doesn't have any money, so they decide to go to the bank and make a withdrawal. Technically, this is a shift from negative to positive. And more importantly, it's boring. There's a part of my brain that's thinking, you know what's missing here? A body. But I digress. If you've heard something in this episode that was helpful to you and you'd like to support the show, then buy me a coffee for as little as $2 at buymeacoffee.com/author ADHey. How can you use value shifts to create better scenes? If you outline or have already written your story, go through each scene and record it in a spreadsheet. Explain the plot and then explain how the scene turns. I like to use 2 columns, one for the beginning and one for the end. And I use the plus and minus symbols along with an explanation of what happens in the scene. To help you figure out how a scene turns, ask yourself these questions. How does the scene start and how does it end? Next, you need to analyze the value shifts in order to figure out whether the scene is turning. Ask yourself a few questions. Does something change in this scene? Is it significant enough to alter the protagonist's path in some way? And is it interesting for the reader? If you answered no to any of those last 3 questions, then your scene has a problem. So you've discovered that one of your scenes isn't turning. By now you're thinking, how can I fix this? The easiest way to fix scenes that don't turn is to consider your story's global values. I know, just what you need, more values. But bear with me for a second. Each genre will have its own set of global story values. These are as follows. Action, horror, and thriller all have a life and death value. Obviously, life being positive, death being negative. Mystery and crime have global values of justice and injustice. Romance obviously has global values of love and hate. The Western genre has global value shifts of freedom and subjugation. Science fiction is a little more complicated because of its many subgenres. You need to pay attention to the story's theme to find its global values, and there's often a power and subordination element in play in the story, usually because the stories are political in nature. The fantasy genre also has a similar issue to sci-fi, but these are the most common global values. For a political society kind of story, the values are power and subordination. A war sort of themed story has honor and dishonor. A worldview story has maturity and naivety, and a morality-based story has altruism and selfishness. So here's an example of how to fix issues within scenes that don't turn. Let's use the mystery genre as an example. Using the story's global values, how can we make the scene turn in the example I discussed earlier? So just to refresh your memory, that scenario was the buying groceries and needing to go to the bank, the boring scenario from earlier. All you have to think is, how can I ruin my protagonist's trip to the bank and potentially the rest of their week? Or in a less villainous way, what obstacles can I throw along their way? Here are a few examples that I've come up with. As the main characters walk into the bank, they notice a suspicious person following them or lurking around the bank entrance. That one is probably more mystery thriller than a murder mystery, but the scene is way more interesting now that intrigue has entered the picture. While waiting in line for the bank, the main character overhears a cryptic conversation between people discussing the suspicious circumstances around the death of someone the protagonist thinks they've heard of but didn't know had passed. You know that moment where you think, I've heard that name before, but I can't remember where. The third scenario, at the ATM, the main character receives a banknote with a message saying, if you've read this, I've been murdered, along with a mobile phone number. And when I say banknote, I mean like the money that you get from the ATM. Do you know how people write things on money sometimes? That is what I'm trying to explain. Not very well, I might add. Number 4, the main character receives a text message from a loved one in distress, urging them to hurry to a specific location. Obviously, the characters in this genre are either empathetic or too curious for their own good, and that's a genre trope the readers expect. The next step after this brainstorming is to choose which direction you want to take the story in and run with it. And now the hard work begins. Rewrite or add more depth to the scene by including this new plot element. If you're working on a finished first draft, you'll have to go through your story and change every scene that is impacted by that change. This is the process I follow when writing Into the Dark. At some point, I'll make a change to the plot and I'll have to go back and foreshadow this upcoming event by changing the previously written scenes. To help you get the most out of this show on turning a scene, here is another writing exercise for you. Step 1. Choose a familiar, everyday scenario where two characters meet for the first time, e.g. a first date, a job interview, a family dinner. You get it, two characters meeting. Write the opening of the scene, establishing the characters and the setting. Step number 3. Brainstorm a list of 5 to 10 unexpected elements that could disrupt the scene. Step 4. Continue writing the scene, incorporating the unexpected element and showing how it creates a value shift. Step 5. Go back over the scene you just wrote and ask yourself the following questions. How did that unexpected element change the dynamics between the characters? What new conflicts or opportunities arose? How did the characters' goals or motivations shift? Step 6. This is optional. Now rewrite that scene with a different unexpected element and compare the results. In the process of double-checking my own understanding of how a scene turns and to avoid spreading misinformation, here are a few sources, mostly books, that I turned to that were the most helpful. The first is Story by Robert McKee, specifically pages 233 to 237 in chapter 10. Be warned, it's a huge book with a small typeface. And the second is Story Grid by Sean Coyne. This book is a terrific resource, but it's worth pointing out that I find this technique a little overwhelming, but you may not. I think it might be all the moving parts that overwhelm me. Nevertheless, check out chapter 56 for more information on value shifts. I hope this episode gave you a basic understanding of value shifts and how to turn scenes. As always, I have a few important questions for you. Do you focus on turning a scene or use value shifts in scenes when outlining or discovery writing? What did you learn in this episode that you plan on applying in your next novel or in your current work in progress? Share your thoughts in the comments section under the blog post or in the Discord server. There's a link to the Discord server in the show notes and over on the blog post. In the next writing tip episode of the podcast, I will delve deeper into how to transition between scenes. Thanks for listening and happy reading and writing, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Authorpreneur podcast. If you love this episode, then hit the subscribe button and leave a review on your favourite podcasting app. I'm your host, Amelia D. Hay, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.